Yeah, the recording started.
Do I have your okay?
Okay.
Just a second.
Okay. That's one of the problems of using the internet for everything, right? We have always these issues.
Not a problem.
No, I don't think it's a problem. It's just Miguel is trying to connect.
Yeah, we are transmitting live through YouTube. YouTube is all right.
Are we ready?
Miguel? It's the Miguel's trying to transmit from to broadcast through Facebook.
Okay,
I think.
all right. Let me know when you're ready.
Sure. It's a streaming. I have a notification here. It says it's already streaming, so we can start. First of all, it's a streaming, definitely. First of all, I'd like to say it's a great honor to have you here with us, Professor Antony Makrynos, from University College London. Miguel and I, we both went there as in last summer or winter, depending on where you are, and we had an amazing experience at this university. So we're really thrilled to have. Really, we're just rebounding from a lot of discussion that we had about the Iliad, and we're really having very high expectations about what we're about to learn, about to hear from you. Mr. Antony Makrynos is currently in Greece. He's the land of Homer, actually the island of Homer, Chios, and he's one of the foremost specialists in the ultimate epic poet. So it's an immense honor to have you here, to hear you speak. And please, the floor is yours. You can speak us.
Thank you very much, Joao, and thank you all for attending and for the invitation. And I'm hoping that I will be able to satisfy all expectations that you have. We have got a very exciting title. Initially, we said it was going to be Homer and the Super-Heróis, but I decided to make it a bit more attractive, using a bit of Homer, in the title as well. Always be the best and superior to others, heroes and heroism, from Achilles to Superman. And we're going to talk about both of them. But let's start with, what we conceive as a hero and our modern conceptions of heroes and heroism. So if you check the Oxford English Dictionary, the modern definition of a hero is a person who is admired by many for his noble qualities of his bravery. For example, we have the expression, "you are my hero," or a chief male character, and that is quite interesting, in a story, poem, or play, the hero of a novel. And according to the American Heritage Dictionary of the English Language, the Indo-European root has to do with the meaning of protection. To protect. A hero is meant to protect. And according to Patrick's in Origins, the Greek word hero is akin to heros, is akin to and relates to the Latin servare, meaning to safeguard. So there is this this sort of relationship between safeguarding, protecting, and the idea of hero. But this is, of course, all very modern. So I would like to make a distinction between the modern definition of hero and the Homeric definition of hero, because I think there are some differences that sometimes confuse us when we read the epics. So if we go through the Iliad, we will see many references to the idea of heroism and hero. I have gathered just a few of them here, but there are so many, and we are going to define the Homeric hero in a second. But let's read some of the references. So when Sarpedon tells to Glaucus about death and glory in the 12th book of the Iliad. Sarpedon and Glaucus are two warriors. He mentions towards the end, he mentions that supposing you and I escaping this battle would be able to live on forever, ageless, immortal, neither would I myself go on fighting in the foremost, nor would I edge you into the fighting where men win glory. But now, seeing that the spirits of death stand close about us, let us go on and win glory for ourselves or yield it to others. So there is a clear relationship established here between heroism and winning glory. And the Homeric hero is a hero because he's actually performing glorious deeds, usually in battle, in order to be immortalized, in order to become a god, in order for the future generations to be aware of what he did and to know his name through, of course, the epic songs, or through, of course, epic songs such as the Iliad and the Odyssey. Helen herself, who is at the very center of the Trojan War, represents war in her tapestry in Book 6 of the Iliad, and suggests that Zeus himself has engineered her affair with Paris, so that in time to come, we may be a poet's theme for men of the future. And again, you see the association of heroism with, glorification. Same happens with the central hero of the Iliad, Achilles, when he laments the death of his very close friend Patroclus in Book 18 of the Iliad. He says that he now let me win fine glory. He wants to kill, to take revenge on Hector in order to achieve glory. Hector's decision to attack Achilles when they have got their duel in Book 22 of the Iliad, when he takes this decision, Hector says, let me least not die without a struggle inglorious, but do some big thing first, that men to come shall know of it. So people who like to talk about Homer glorifying war, they bring into our attention these passages that associate the idea of glory with the idea of heroism. There's no doubt that in the Mycenaean years, we have had those professional bards, singers called Aoidoi, who sang the tales of heroes. And indeed, those epic songs, they were not created for us to study in universities or to give talks about them. They were created for the entertainment of people. People were gathering all around and they were hearing singers singing the glorious deeds of their heroes. And they were, and I think here you can find one of the first things that are important even for us in terms of why we have heroes. We have heroes because we see ourselves in them. We identify with them. Or we dream to be like them. Or all the things that we couldn't do, we see in them, and so on and so forth. This is why heroes, were very important, and they still are very important for us. Now, if we talk a little bit about the plot of the Iliad and the Odyssey in relation to the heroic ideal, we will see, of course, that there is a narrative that assumes a lot of previous knowledge from persons and events. So when Homer starts his Iliad, he talks, for example, about, he says, "Sing me news of the wrath of Achilles, son of Peleus." He doesn't need to explain who Peleus is. You are supposed to know. So, things like that have to do with the characters, with the plot, with what has happened. Homer assumes that we know. And we also should know that the two huge mega themes that relate to the human condition and that are at the very center of both the Iliad and the Odyssey are, of course, war and journey, or rather the journey of return. So the Iliad is dealing with war. initially, of course, and the number one theme of the Iliad is the wrath of Achilles, as the poet tells us at the very beginning. But of course, it deals with the Trojan War, itself, and it's quite important that in relation to previous songs or other songs that we had about the Trojan War, the Iliad is pretty innovative because it doesn't follow a linear narration, i.e., it doesn't start with, say, the judgment of Paris or the wedding of Peleus and Thetis, and it doesn't finish with the sack of Troy. It actually examines 40, 50 days in the 10th year of the war, and its main subject is the wrath of Achilles. So this is, and it finishes with eventually with the funeral of Hector, not the sack of Troy. So that is quite important and quite interesting. There are several story patterns. We call them formulaic because they keep repeating throughout those stories. That relate to heroism as well. So some of them I have included here: the withdrawal and the devastation and the return of a hero, the abduction of a heroine, the loss of the hero's friend, quarrel between heroes, the rescue of the hero, and so on and so forth. And there are also some specific heroic values that are attached to the stories of heroes, such as the physical powers that the heroes have. They can be beauty, strength, speed, intelligence, their excellence in war, wealth, leadership, honor, glory, their divine lineage, and so on and so forth. So these are some of the values that actually define the Homeric hero, and that sometimes promotes the plot as well of the Iliad and the Odyssey. A hero can be inhuman, can be subhuman, and sometimes he can be superhuman. And there are, of course, different other concepts as well, such as wrath, strife, hubris, revenge, or death, that relate to the lives of heroes. But it is extremely important that we acknowledge that all these values and all these concepts are concepts taken and values taken and emotions taken from human life. And it is exactly because of this very reason that we identify so much, even nowadays, with those stories, because those stories talk about human life. And it is also perhaps the same reason that we don't identify very much with the Homeric gods, because the Homeric gods, even if they are anthropomorphic and they behave like humans. So they eat, they drink, they have sex, sometimes they commit adultery, they are wounded, in Homer. Nevertheless, they have got immortality and they live forever. And the sort of things that we see, if you want, in the mortal plane, take a different kind of significance in the divine plane. So, for example, if we take adultery, and you have got the most beautiful woman in the world being abducted, Helen being abducted by Paris. You have got war, you have got killings, you have got misery, a whole city is sacked, and so on and so forth. You've got tragedy, in other words. But the same kind of thing when it happens in the divine level. So when Ares commits adultery with Aphrodite, who is supposed to be married, who is married actually with Hephaestus, and they are caught on bed, and they are trapped by Hephaestus, and all the gods laugh at them. Nothing really tragic happens. They'll just forget about it. It's just a completely different world, and there you have got, dare I say, more comedy than tragedy. So it's quite interesting to see how this works in divine and mortal, in mortal level. And of course, in the epics, you have got formulaic scenes and common motives, as we have said, that relate to heroism, fighting tactics, duel scenes, trip to the underworld. All or most famous Greek heroes go to the underworld. They have to face their own death. Hospitality scenes, which are very important for the Greeks. Recognition scenes, also very important, especially in the Odyssey. Death speeches, equally important in the Iliad. If we had to put together a glossary of the Homeric hero, and we had to identify some of the values that a hero must have, or that play an important role in the hero's life, We have got Aristeia, which means excellence. Most of the big heroes in the Iliad have got an Aristeia. Usually they are helped by the gods to achieve it. And Aristeia is simply something that proves, it's the evidence that the hero is a hero. Then we have got Time, honor, which is extremely important for the hero. This is the removal of honor actually creates a lot of problems, and this is why the wrath of Achilles happens, because there was a removal of honor from Agamemnon, the leader of the Greek army, because he took Achilles' girl, Briseis, prize from war. We've got Gera's gift, we've got Cleo's glory that we talked about a bit. Philotis, friendship, is extremely important between male heroes in the Iliad. We have got Aidos, shame, and that's also extremely important. The Iliadic world is a world of shame. Hector actually loses his life, just to bring one example, because of shame. He's ashamed to go back inside the walls of Troy, telling his compatriots that he could not face Achilles. So because of this kind of peer pressure and shame, he stays eventually and he fights Achilles and he dies. Misjudgment plays hamartia a very important role, because partly the heroes are sympathetic to us because they misjudge specific situations. So we feel for Achilles because he misjudges the whole situation with Patroclus. He lets him go to war and eventually take his place in war, actually, and eventually his friend is killed by Hector. And then Achilles has to pay for this misjudgment, and he eventually pays with his own life, because we know that he will pay with his own life, because if he kills Hector, we know that eventually he will be killed himself. There is arrogance, which is punished by the gods, hubris. There is revenge, which is taken. And there is, of course, care, which is one of the, it's actually one of the words that denote the fate of death. And in Homer, you have got different words for fate. You have got, of course, the Moirai, the three fates, which define and know the life of someone, but you also have a separate word for the fate of death. So whom do we call a hero in Homer? We call a hero someone who has got prestigious lineage, someone who has got physical values, so super beautiful or super quick. Like Achilles is swift-footed. This epithet is very characteristic of him. Someone who is very strong, beyond normal, or someone who has got a sharp mind and excellent rhetorical skills like Odysseus. I'm not suggesting that all Homeric heroes will have all of those, but different Homeric heroes excel in different physical values. So you've got other heroes who are extremely strong, and you have got some other heroes who are extremely clever or cunning, or extremely quick. Homeric hero should be an aristocrat, so he should be wealthy. He should lead people, so he should demonstrate leadership and most of the times political capabilities as well. Sometimes there are no constrictions in what he's doing. There are instances in which, for example, the heroes are able to see the gods. And even there is a very important scene in the Iliad where they can even wound the gods with the help of another god. And in terms of invulnerability, sometimes they are invulnerable, like, for example, Achilles, but they can also have weak spots, weak points, exactly like Achilles' heel. So again, it is this kind of idea that we identify with them because of the fact that they have got a weak point, something that the gods do not possess. So this is, we defined, I told you a couple of things about, nobility and divine ancestry and the physical beauties, their strength, and how we define a Homeric hero. before we come to our modern heroes, and perhaps we have a kind of comparison, I also want to say that there are some other instances in the epics where you can have this special relationship that heroes have got, for example, with their weapons, which is something which has passed into later literature as well. If you think, I don't know, for example, the famous story with the Excalibur and King Arthur, let's say. You have things like that in Homer as well. So, for example, Achilles' armor is pretty special. His spear, he's the only one who can lift up. Patroclus, in fact, does not take Achilles' spear because he cannot lift it up. You know, there is a whole book in the Iliad almost about the shield of Achilles. The Achilles' horses are divine and they are able to speak at times. So, you know, there are a lot of different things that sometimes associate the hero with their weapon or with their horses, or with you know, something special, that a special instrument that they have. Now, I have sent you an article by Umberto Eco on the myth of Superman, and I'm quoting a small part from that because I think it is relevant when we try to compare the two. Superman, Umberto Eco says, is a myth on Superman is myth on condition of being a creature immersed in everyday life, in the present, apparently tied to our own conditions of life and death, even if endowed with superior faculties. An immortal Superman would no longer be a man, but a god, and the public's identification with his double identity would fall by the wayside. Superman then must remain somehow inconsumable and at the same time be consumed according to the ways of everyday life. So is this again what we said before, that we actually need to have some sort of connection with the hero in order to identify with them. The case of Superman, because I like it and I think they have got a lot of similarities. You will be able to identify the fact that they both have superpowers. They have got an excellent physical condition. They're incredibly fast. They've got omnipotence almost, and they are both big in size. They have got divine lineage. They have got beauty and masculinity. It is quite interesting that they are politicians, well-established politicians. They have the ability to change world politics. They both use violence, and they both at times seem to be isolated and lonely, and you can see, especially for Achilles, it is quite interesting that you have got a certain kind of hero that we do not fully identify with in modern societies, because Achilles is not the kind of hero who actually would sacrifice himself for the community, or who would do something for his country, or who would do, he's a very individualistic hero. He's a hero who is doing things for himself, for his own glory, and this is fine. In the Homeric world, this is absolutely fine. It might not be compatible to our idea of hero, because of course we have also passed through different filters of, say, for example, Christianity is one of them, and we in our mind, a hero should be someone who sacrifices himself for the community, or who defends the community, or who is a family man, protects his family, and so on and so forth, but not in the world of Homer. You can have heroes like that in Homer as well. Say, for example, Hector. Hector is a family man who protects his wife, and there is in book 6 a very emotive scene between Hector and Andromache, one of the most famous scenes in Western literature, where Hector has to see his wife and kid for the last time before going to war. But Achilles is not this kind of hero, but nevertheless, he is a hero, and that is very important to stress. So back to Achilles and Superman. They are both invulnerable with a weak point, Achilles' heel and the kryptonite, and they are both heterosexual, but with alternative homoerotic stories. And it's quite interesting to see that there is a shift of attention as well nowadays. Especially in novelizations that have to do with Homer, written by female authors, most of them. There is a kind of focus on this homoerotic story between Achilles and Patroclus, just like Madeline Miller's Song of Achilles. So it's quite interesting to see that. But they don't only have, those two heroes, they don't only have similarities, they also have differences. For example, we can see differences in their identity or how they are identifying themselves. So Achilles is Achilles. He wants to be Achilles. He wants to have his name, as we said, glorified, and he wants to be famous, and he wants he wants his name to survive through epic songs. Superman, on the other hand, he has got a double identity. He is both Clark Kent, an everyday life journalist, and Superman. Perhaps there is a difference there, and perhaps there is this. Perhaps there is a reason why modern heroes have got a double identity, in the sense that they want to present themselves as someone who could be, an everyday life person, but at the same, someone who will have extraordinary capabilities. And obviously, you can see other similarities with other superheroes that we have nowadays, like Batman or Spider-Man. They have got double identities as well. Now, the second difference that I identified, there might be more, but these are the three main that I identified, is the individualism of Achilles, and his sense of community and common good. Achilles will do everything to promote himself, to achieve glory for himself, and to achieve glorious deeds only for himself, and to have his name glorified. And when this doesn't happen, or when he feels that his honor is insulted or offended in any way, he will remove himself from war, even if this means that Greeks will die. So this is one of the main differences, that Achilles is going to do that, whilst of course Superman cares more for the common good, cares for the human lives of people, and he is always there in order to protect them and be this kind of hero, which, as I said before, comes closer to Hector. So, Hector, the patriot or the countryman or the family man who actually fights for his country and for his wife and child and for his family. So, there is this kind of difference between them. Another difference that we're able to identify, and I would like to discuss with you, if you're interested in that. I am immensely, is this moral distinction between good and evil. So in the Iliad, I think when you examine the nature of heroism in Achilles or Hector or even the other heroes, you cannot really tell who is good and who is the body or the evil. There's no good and evil. They're just different kinds of heroes who fight for different kinds of purposes. In the Odyssey, perhaps it is a bit different. Perhaps the Odyssey is a bit more moral, and there have been several both ancient and modern scholiasts who suggested that the Odyssey is a kind of more moral epic than the Iliad, because there it is, there is a clear distinction between Odysseus and the suitors. Odysseus is good and the suitors are bad. are evil because they try to kill his son, they try to steal Odysseus' world, his wife, his throne, etc., etc. Same with Odysseus and the Cyclops. Odysseus is presented as someone good, and Cyclops as a monster. You have a clearer sense there who is good, who is bad, but not in the Iliad. And I think in our stories as well, you have a clear sense between good and evil. So you know that Superman is good, and you know that Lex Luthor is bad. You know that Batman is good, and you know that Joker is bad. And things like that. In the latest years, of course, there might be. Just to make things a bit more interesting, there might have been, excuse me, there might have been an effort to actually give reasons why someone who is evil is evil. So and this is a different kind of narrative which has obviously connections with what is happening in our societies with with terrorism or with different kinds of things that happen. So it is interesting that however this is happening. So different kinds of just to sum up, and I'm going to close in a bit, different kinds of values and attitudes then and now. We have got the superiority versus cowardice, the mortality and death, the tragic element, and the audience's sympathy. These are extremely important as well. The audience have to feel the tragic element in order to be able to identify with the heroes. And why not? We can also identify with the heroes when they fail. And sometimes they do fail. And in Homer, quite often the heroes fail, or the heroes even cry. We could have a discussion about tearful heroes. I mean, both Achilles and Odysseus are crying throughout the Iliad and the Odyssey quite a lot of times. And this does not necessarily mean that they are weak, or that they are not masculine, or that they are not heroes. They can cry because something has happened, and then they can move on and still be the heroes that they are. I'm not sure that it would be very easy to see Superman crying or Batman crying in the same kind of way, but this is something which is interesting as well. In terms of heroic behavior, you have the quest for honor, you've got the respect towards the gods, you've got the individualism, the sense of community sometimes, and what we talked about, morality, good versus evil. In terms of war and peace, the Homeric heroes see, at least the male Homeric heroes, see war as an opportunity. You've got idealism as well, and you don't have cynicism. And of course, for the failure of heroes, as we said, for Homer, this is it happens quite often, and perhaps that's why his heroes are so human. You only have to think about, say, Achilles or Odysseus. We talked about Achilles' misjudgment. If you want to talk about Odysseus, there is a point where Odysseus actually, finds himself in the land of the Phaeacians, completely naked, i.e., Odysseus, the number one hero who actually managed to bring Troy down with a Trojan horse, the conqueror of Troy, if you want. Eventually finds himself without companions, without his weapons, without his clothes, without all the treasures that he took from Troy, being a beggar, and trying to find, after 10 years, his way back home. And even after he finds his way back home, he's a beggar in his own house, and he's trying to reconstruct his family. That's what it is all about. In the Iliad, you have got the deconstruction of the family, i.e., Hector's and Andromache's family, and in the Odyssey, you have got the reconstruction of a family, and the family of Odysseus and Penelope. So the failure of the heroes is something really important to consider when we are talking about the Homeric heroes in comparison to say modern heroes and how modern heroes behave. And as I said before, this failure is something that sometimes we identify with, because of the fact that we are not gods, and because of the fact that we make mistakes, we make misjudgments, but also because of the fact that we have got emotions, just like our heroes. So, all those different kind of very intense emotions that we have in our lives, you can see in them in the Homeric epics. You can reflect and think about wrath and anger and the results that extreme anger has in the life of people, the disastrous results. You can feel separation when Hector separates from Andromache. You can feel despair and grief for the death of your friend. When Achilles feels these things for Patroclus. You can feel the reconciliation of enemies when Priam begs for the body of his son Hector from Achilles. There are so many different kinds of feelings that the Homeric heroes have. And to which, of course, we identify very much. The recognition scenes in the Odyssey are offering also a very big mosaic of feelings. When Odysseus, is recognized by his son, and they reunite again, and when he's one of the most moving scenes is when his old dog recognizes his master and then dies, and of course that causes Odysseus to cry. And then there's the recognition with Penelope, of course, and the recognition with Odysseus's old father Laertes, which is one of the most moving scenes for me in the Odyssey. It's one of the scenes in which Odysseus cannot lie about his identity. He tries to, but he's overcome by emotion, and he has to hug his father and prove to him that he is Odysseus and he is back. I have included this because I find it very relevant to what is happening sometimes with political leaders when they actually try to take the values of hero or copy the values of heroes. And this was part of the political campaign of Trump when he in the first elections, when he was trying, to present himself as a superhero. So it's quite interesting, I think, for political discourse as well, that our politicians are using, the values of heroes, and there must be a reason why they are doing this. And the same, of course, happens with different kinds of events. These are some of the events that have been happening in the UK in the latest years, and that were, dealing with heroism and with the stories of the Iliad and the Odyssey, and what they mean to us, and what they want to communicate to us. And I have also sent a podcast to João. He can share it with you. We have had some years ago a very interesting discussion with Bethany Hughes and Edith Hall and Folakian Ayemi on heroism and the Iliad, which was broadcasted from BBC World Service. So that's quite interesting for you if you want, available on the internet. And my final thing is that if you want more about heroism and about Homer, do feel free to join our summer school in Homer, which happens this coming summer 2021 online, 2nd to 6th of August. And where you can study Homer in Greek if you want, in all levels, or in translation, English translation. We'll have modern Greek class. We'll have ancient philosophy on Homer, comparative literature on Homer, a roundtable on emotions, and several talks and artistic events on Homer. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Antony. I'm sure we all had an amazing time hearing you. Just like to know, until how long can we ask questions?
I don't mind until we answer everything.
Okay then. Okay. Before I'll already tell everyone who's listening, both here on Zoom and on YouTube and on Facebook, you can ask questions, and we're trying to either through messaging or through comments, or if you're in here in Zoom, you can actually you can ask personally. Just to start with one question of mine. Actually, I had two questions. Sorry. The first one, you mentioned Achilles was a hero who's very individualistic, and he doesn't. He's obsessed with glory.
Yeah.
But by my reading of the Iliad, at least, it seemed to me that Achilles is somewhat of a hero in denial in the first part of the Iliad, because he knows from the beginning that if he goes to war, he will die and he'll be remembered forever. And still, he spends 2/3 of the Iliad not going, and he only goes because when his loved one, like in a friendly way, either or not, but his loved one dies, and he goes kind of moved because of this emotion, not because of I mean, I read this like it's not just because of only because of glory, but also because of love, because of emotional values, right?
When you yes, when you say love, you mean for Patroclus?
Yeah, yeah.
Yes, yes. No,
Not
absolutely.
not necessarily romantic love, but like friendly love.
Oh, absolutely not romantic love. The idea of Patroclus being a lover of Achilles is not Homeric at all. It's something that came much later in Aeschylus, with Aeschylus. But yes, this does not contradict what I said. I think about that about the fact that Achilles is an individualistic hero. By individualistic hero, I mean that he's actually not the kind of community hero that Hector is. That's what I mean, and that's why I think quite a lot of people don't like Achilles because of the fact that his motivation, if you want, is very personal. You know, he's doing things for himself, and as you correctly said, for quite a big part of the epic, he removed himself from war. He doesn't participate in war. But there is actually a very valid reason for that. And the valid reason is that his honor has been offended. And don't forget, Joao, this is an honor society. You know, it's a society which is based on honor and glory. You cannot remove someone's girl or someone's price of war, as Briseis was. And in fact, Achilles at some point mentions that he even wanted to marry Briseis. So you know, she's someone important, and you cannot remove her without consequences. You know, and Agamemnon does exactly that in the most horrible ways. So he has got a reason to remove himself from war. Now, of course, he regrets, I think, partly having done that after the death of Patroclus. Um, you know, when there is a reconciliation scene between Agamemnon and Achilles, and they say that it must have been the will of the gods, and delusion brought them to this stage. You know, but in any case, you know, it is a kind of misjudgment in the sense that you know, he sent Patroclus to war because he thought he was going to come back alive and everything would be fine. But of course, he doesn't come back alive. And because of this thing, we have got the second wrath of Achilles, which now is not anymore against Agamemnon, but it's against Hector.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking actually. And the second question, which is kind of a question in commentary, you mentioned how modern politicians tend to identify themselves as heroes and Trump, etc. And I was just reading Achilles sorry, Alexander the Great biography from Plutarch, and how he worshipped the Iliad, etc. And I kind of see many similarities between his figure and Achilles as well. I don't know if that's a thing. Like there was a proper goal of him to identify himself as Achilles or Hercules. How this works in the ancient world.
Well, I mean, Alexander, I think, did this on purpose. And as you said, he tried to identify himself with Achilles and the line of Hercules. And also he created this kind of parallel, if you want, between himself and Hephaestion and Achilles and Patroclus. I think this was perhaps it was personal, I don't know, but I think it was also political, and it promoted some sort of confirmation, if you want, through the heroic past. This was something which was quite common, and you can see that in his public policy with coins, for example. Many times he is represented with a lion, on coins, with a lion skin on his head, as if he is Hercules. And that makes sense, actually, because at the time, of course, nobody has got internet, but everybody could have Alexander as Hercules in their pockets, which actually projects an image of a specific image of Alexander, of having all the features that Achilles or Hercules have had. And of course, there are other stories about Alexander, that he was sleeping with the copy of the Iliad that Aristotle gave him under his pillow, and so on and so forth. Jean, I have to tell you, if ever the tomb of Alexander is found, my favorite object from antiquity would be that this Iliad was found in his coffin next to him.
Yeah, it's all.
Hopefully with the comments by Aristotle.
Yeah, it's all commented by Aristotle, right? It must be amazing. Anyone else have a question?
I have a question. Actually, it's good that John bring it, Alexander, because I wanted to ask you something. When I was reading reviews for the Alexander movie from Oliver Stone, between the multiple critics that the movie received, like cinematography, etc., one that I found it particularly interesting was that the movie tried too much to represent it as the Greeks will understand Alexander, and to bring the image of hero. I don't know if you agree with this, but that it tried too much to present how Alexander as a Greek hero and with a Greek mentality, and that it sounded strange to modern viewers. That people would like complain when watching Alexander that, oh, but he's not performing as a hero. Where's his interest for the people? Where's this? All the things that you pointed as the differences between modern expectations for a hero and how the Greeks perceive the hero. And people will complain that, oh, but he's too sentimental and he's only looking for himself, and that will be something that will bring a strangeness to watching this Alexander. So I would like to ask you, what do you think about how could the image of the Greek hero, as it was perceived by the Greeks, but as a Homeric understanding of a hero, if it could be how it could be presented to modern audiences?
No, this is a very interesting and very difficult question. I'll try to answer it from what I know. Well, first of all, when we talk about film, you have to keep in mind that we talk about a cultural product which needs to make money. And it's also very interesting to think. It's also very important to think who makes this product. So if this product is created in a Western society, by a production team which belongs to the West, they will want to promote specific values, and at the same time, of course, they will want to sell the product. So these are two factors that actually have an influence on how you depict the heroes, whether you are going, for example, to include gods or not. When it was the same thing with Troy, what you just mentioned. The other point, which is very important that you mentioned, is this this sentimentalism or romanticism, which is not a new phenomenon in films. If you see, for example, films from the 50s or 60s that relate or that they want to relate either the Homeric world or in general the ancient world, you will see that they put at the front, for example, the love story between Paris and Helen, let's say. Something which is not what is happening in the story by Homer. In the Iliad, the story between Helen and Paris doesn't get a lot of attention. So this shift, if you want, to romance and romanticism is something that has started dates back in the history of cinema, and you can see it in those films, and of course you can see it still. In very modern films, in films like Troy or Alexander, and of course there is a reason why you see it there. Just like perhaps there is a reason why you need to have happy endings. It's some there are some standard, I guess, techniques that Hollywood is using and that they sell, and that people identify with them, and they want to explore, they want to see on their screens. So that makes sense in order to sell the product. That is why I think, answering your question about how can we actually make a film about the Iliad, I don't think there has been a film about the Iliad. In fact, I think most films, that's why you will see based on Homer, but it's not really the Iliad. It's quite interesting that there is a resurgence of films that have to do with the ancient world after Gladiator. When you see how many films, 300 and Alexander and Troy and the Clash of the Titans, and so many films that have to do with mythology or with the ancient world. But I think it is very difficult to actually put Homer, I mean the Iliad, as it is on film. There was a very, one of the things that will never happen that I would like them to happen is an effort to direct an Iliad by Stanley Kubrick, who actually had in mind to do something like that, but because of the finance aspect, he did not proceed with it. Edith Hall is talking about this at some point in her book on the cultural journey of the Odyssey. But of course, after that, he did, Spartacus and the Space Odyssey and so on and so forth that relate to the ancient world and to Homer at some point. So yes, if there are any glorious directors or directors in the making out there, this is a very good project, to try to create a rather an Iliad or an Odyssey which would be very close to the Homeric ideals of heroism. But also, I should say, good luck with deciding whether you want gods or not, and also good luck with selling it to the world.
Thank you very much for your answer, Anthony. It was very clarifying. And another question I have is that you brought up how Aeschylus will present in a different way, and I would like to ask you the difference between how tragedy presents the stories from the Iliad and Odyssey to how Homer talks about it, because especially in Ajax and in Philoctetes, for example, the presentation of who Odysseus is and how he behaves changed the light considerably. And if you would like to talk more about that, because I found it
Yeah.
very interesting.
Yes, it is very interesting, and there is an obvious change of heart and light, not only in the depiction of Odysseus himself, but also in the depiction of some of the myths, some of the Homeric myths. So let's take, for example, the myth of Helen and what happened to Helen. If you take into consideration Euripides' Helen, there's a completely different kind of story, isn't there? Helen doesn't go to Troy, and it's the phantom of Helen who went to Troy, and then Menelaus leaves Troy and finds the real Helen in Egypt, and so on and so forth. Artists, just like nowadays, feel free to play with alternative versions of the myth, and that is perfectly valid. If you're an artist, you can do that in the ancient world, and you can do that now. And the same, I think, applies with how you depict various heroes, and especially for Odysseus, he has got quite a lot of different faces. um, there are already some characteristics of Odysseus that you have got in Homer, and that you can think how they could have an impact on his presentation as the baddie, in tragedy. So he's someone who is lying all the time, for example. He wants to achieve until he manages to achieve his goals. He will do anything. I mean, to me, Odysseus in Homer, he is the equivalent of James Bond. He's always chosen to perform the most difficult tasks. He's sent with Diomedes in the Trojan camp to spy. And he manages, of course, to steal the horses of Rhesus, which is an extremely dangerous. And to find out about the intentions of the Trojans, it's extremely dangerous. It's like a mission impossible, and he's always successful. He's always successful in these missions. So yes, in Homer he is idealized, and he is presented as the perfect hero, if you want, through his cunning and through his wisdom and through the fact that he that doesn't mean necessarily that he doesn't make mistakes, but he's learning along the way. And surely, Odysseus at the end of the Odyssey is a much clever man than he is at the beginning of the Odyssey. And that is very obvious when you check his dialogues with how cleverly he rejects a goddess asking him to be immortal, Calypso, or with how in the recognition scene with or even when he arrives in Ithaca, how he manages to control himself not to go to the palace and reveal that he's back. These are he knows better there. He has make enough mistakes to know better than that. But as you said, in Greek tragedy, for different kinds of reasons, Homeric figures like Philoctetes or Ajax, or stories that have to do with Philoctetes or Ajax or Odysseus or even Achilles are taking a different light. Partly because of the needs of a different audience. Don't forget that tragedy is presented to a male Athenian audience, which is not the same as the Homeric audience, but also, partly because, the artists feel that they want to be creative and innovative. I have got Joao, I have got a question, I think, here from a private question from Pedro, who says that he has to type instead of talking because he's in a noisy environment. That's fine. Do you think that not only modern politicians view themselves as heroes, but we also view them as heroes who have to base their politics in order to help the people and for the common good instead of having to rely on glory? Yes, I think so. I think we do have these expectations sometimes that our politicians represent the values that we have or that we connect with, and that we expect them to help people in more than one ways, or to promote policies that help people in more than one ways. It's quite interesting, for example, what is happening. If you want to be very modern and bring the COVID, I was trying to avoid the COVID discussion, but we can bring it. There are politicians who promote this heroic profile, in the sense that they are the Supermen who are fighting COVID, and for the good of their people, as so to speak. And that, of course, is done for different kinds of reasons. It can be for political interest, but also it can be a genuine. A genuine thing as well. And there are prime ministers all over the world who have achieved to increase their popularity with the way they have dealt with the COVID crisis, and some who failed to do that, of course.
Yeah. That actually remember me the Macron's pronouncements as a Jupiterian presidency. Yeah, that's also like not modern politicians trying to emulate something in the ancient world, right?
Yeah. Or you can think about New Zealand's prime minister as well, who has been so successful, and she has been re-elected now because of that. And there are various examples. Yes.
Yeah, I think Luisa had a question, right?
Yeah, I have two questions. The first one is you talked about like this idea of like good and bad in storytelling, and especially in like Homer stories. And then we stemmed away from that. We like started having like this really like this guy's like super good and he never does like anything wrong, and then like we have this like awful person. And I feel like now, like especially in cinema and books, we're going back to that idea that people are nuanced. And I wanted to ask you, why do you think that's happening right now? And the second question I have is you talked about like the heroes. One of the definitions said that one of the heroes is like a man, specifically a man. And I wanted to know what you think about the role in women, especially like being regarded as heroes.
Yes. Well, thanks a lot for the questions. In relation to the first question, I suppose we are trying to make our films more and more interesting, and perhaps the division between just good and evil is not enough anymore. So we are trying to find some more. We live in a complicated world, and perhaps this complicated world. We're trying to depict it in our films as well, or depict the different kinds of anxieties that exist in the public, and of anxieties that exist in the heroes as well. So you might find that in the latest years you have got films about superheroes which are not following the simplistic view of good and evil, or clearly good and evil that we have had in the past. I'm referring in particular to the Dark Knight. I don't know whether you have seen the Dark Knight and the Dark Knight trilogy, but this is I think a very revolutionary superhero film, in the sense that it is deeply philosophical, not only about the heroes but also about the villains. So it poses some deep philosophical questions about terrorism, and about why terrorism happens, or why villains do what they do, and how successful heroes can be in order to respond to that. Modern heroes, I mean. In relation to the second question, which has to do with women. If I didn't understand whether Luisa was actually referring to the Homeric world or to the modern world, but if we're referring to heroines, let's say in the Homeric world, we have to always keep in mind what the context is, the historical context is. And women are seen in the Homeric world in a certain kind of way. So, for example, they are prizes of war. So war is not for women what it is for men. For men, it is a chance to glorify themselves, but for women, it can bring misery, and it can bring slavery, and they have to follow the lack of their husbands. So see what happens with Andromache. She will end up losing her child and becoming a slave. So it's not the same thing. Having said that, of course, different women heroines play a different role. So the role of Briseis is not the same as the role of Helen or of Andromache. And I am one of those people who believe that the women play an immensely important role in both the Iliad and the Odyssey, even of the Trojan War. So you see, for example, what happens if you compare. You can imagine what happens if you compare the Helen Paris Menelaus, if you want, pair with Hector Andromache pair, or what happens if you even take this further to the Odyssey and you bring Odysseus, the Odysseus Penelope pair as well. So it is really interesting. We could talk for hours about women in the Homeric epics. What also I find very interesting is whether, and this we could discuss if you want. I mean, it's one of the biggest problems, whether we should see goddesses as the projection of mortal women in the Iliad and in the Odyssey. Whether, for example, the fact that this discussion will get very heated. I can feel it. Whether, for example, the fact that Odysseus has got sex with Calypso on his travels is actually acceptable, if you want to use this term, when compared to the fact that his mortal wife Penelope is being faithful and is waiting for him back home, and so on and so forth. But within this kind of if you want, context, we should keep in our mind that Calypso is a goddess, and that I think the world of gods is entirely different. What can happen in the world of gods is entirely different to what happens in the mortal Calypso is doing. If you compare it to his reaction to Nausicaa, for example, who is a mortal woman who wants him very much, is entirely different. In fact, towards the end of his stay with Calypso, he is deeply miserable, and he wants to go back, he wants to leave, and so on and so forth. Now, of course, someone could argue, yes, but what about the beginning when he was having sex with Calypso? We don't have much about this, but it's quite interesting actually to reflect on whether we see beings like Calypso, Circe, the Sirens, Scylla and Charybdis, all those monsters and divine beings as we see Nausicaa or Penelope, or someone who is a mortal woman, and what the effect is on the reader as well.
Thank you.
I think just like I tried it. There's also like there's two figures in Homeric epic, two womanly figures. Of course, Athena, who's like the main mentor of Odysseus, and also after the Iliad, correct me if I'm wrong, Achilles will fight with Penthesilea, something I don't know how to pronounce it in English, but who's a women soldier, right? So how was an Amazon, exactly. How was this viewed by the Greeks when they were reading the epics, etc.? Was this considered natural or something like that?
I think this is. The two cases that you have, again, the two cases that you have mentioned, they are a bit different. So Athena is a goddess, and I think one of the most interesting things that have happened after Homer, after the composition of the epics, is that you have had the division or the creation of two separate trends in the interpretation, in the Homeric interpretation. So you had the people who were very critical about Homer, especially about his gods, and people like Xenophanes from the 6th century BC, who were like, look, the gods cannot be like that. They cannot be like human beings. They cannot have weaknesses like this. They cannot have sex. They shouldn't commit adultery. Are we happy with these gods? How can these be gods? They should be perfect. And this kind of criticism is actually finding its peak with Plato. But then at the same time, you have got the defenders of Homer, and you have got people who are allegorizing Homer. And basically, the defenders of Homer are using allegorization in order to say that, look, when you read the Iliad and the Odyssey, Athena is not Athena, and Poseidon is not Poseidon, and Apollo is not Apollo. So when Homer tells us that Apollo and Poseidon built the walls of Troy, he means water and heat. You need water and heat to build walls. When Athena is stopping Achilles from killing Agamemnon, this is a kind of psychological force, if you want, in the mind of Achilles. That's why nobody else sees here, only Achilles. So, in other words, the allegories have tried to give a sort of sometimes natural allegorization or psychological allegorization to suggest that the gods in Homer serve a kind of subtext, which we as readers or the audience of Homer as hearers had to decipher, or had to understand. I think the episode with Penthesilea is a bit different, and the Greeks have heard about the Amazons and the male characteristics of the Amazons, that they were warriors, that they were able to ride a horse and so on and so forth. And I think I see this episode between Achilles and Penthesilea, which has also been the inspiration for many vase painters, I have to say, especially the moment of death, where there is this erotic gaze, the erotic look between the two. And recently, this has been also explored by female novelists. In their stories. So I find this more as a kind of part of the myth, or of the Trojan cycle, if you want, because this kind of story is not exactly in the Iliad, but it's part of the wider episodes that have to do with the sack of Troy. And it is in these episodes that you can actually see how someone could go, let's say, to the island of Delos and gather all the singers with their songs, and you could have the Eurovision of the time, where each one would sing an episode from the Iliad or an episode from the Odyssey, and they would compete with each other, and they will get a prize.
That's a clever, very clever comparison. Thank you. I think the next one who's transfer is Guilherme.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So my question actually relates to the previous one. So you when you talked about the good and evil and the heroes, something I thought about and I wonder is like if this conception of good and evil and the lack thereof in the Greek and heaven and Greek religion, there's just Tartarus, which is like a purgatory or something. So and the good and evil conception we have would be something more Christian like. Is that so?
Yes, perhaps that has to do with that. I'm not sure it entirely has to do with that. So first of all, I have been trying to think quite a lot on whether on the idea of sin, and whether we have the idea of sin in the Iliad and the Odyssey. I suppose someone could be sinful against the gods in the sense of committing hubris or something like that, and that would be evil. If you see what happens in the Odyssey, for example, with the beginning at the beginning of book one, where Zeus is talking about the story of Aegisthus and Agamemnon and what has happened to him because of the fact that he says that the gods actually told Aegisthus not to kill Agamemnon, but he didn't care. He still went on to kill Agamemnon, and there's Zeus is shifting the responsibility from the gods to the humans. So they're responsible